Frank, good to see you again, first of all,
Thanks.
and thanks for taking
Yes.
time out. I know you've been really busy lately. I'll start out by asking, we're doing this story because April marks 20 years since the charges were officially announced. Can you believe it's been 20 years since this first made headlines?
No, I can't. I feel like it was a different life. Sometimes I feel it was like a nightmare that it really didn't happen, that I'm just talking about some story.
Let's go back to that time. And it's 20 years for us that we've known about it, but of course, this case started in the late 90s. You've been involved in it even much longer than that. And I'm sure in your lectures, you get asked this question all the time, but what prompted you to write that letter to the FBI?
Well, that's a good question, Dane. So the letter was 20 years in the making. It wasn't something that was overnight. It had nothing to do with my time. It had nothing to do with my loyalty to my dad. It was me trying to distance it myself from my dad to change my life. He wants to keep doing this life, that's fine. But me, I had my kids now. I had change of heart, and this wasn't what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. But the problem was when we went to prison and I wound up in the same prison with him, I figured we'd probably start working out our differences. And because I was doing such good time in prison, he decides he wants to bring me back in. Had I had bad days in prison, he would have never brought me back in. And he wanted to bring me back in. And it came to the point where I realized he is never going to let me out of this, and he's never going to let control of me. And I have to do something. And the choices that I had, which I talk about many a times, were two: wait till he gets on the street, finish this with him. He's good at killing. I'd probably either be dead or he's dead and I might be in jail. The other one was getting the government to help.
So, Frank, how difficult was it for you to go against your father?
The hardest thing I ever did in my life. I loved my dad. I did not love his ways, but it's my father. But it wasn't the man I knew years ago. The man I knew years ago had a huge heart, never brought the street in the home. He started physically and mentally abusing the whole family for many years. And it came to a point where somebody needed to stand up to him. And I wound up in the same prison with him, and I felt it was my time to stand up to him. But I did give him months and months of me and him trying to work everything out. And I used what he taught me against him I wanted to see if he was telling the truth. But he kept trying to manipulate me, and I knew there was nothing I can do. This was the only choice I had, and I had to make that choice.
What was it like for you when you were in the prison yard with him? You're wearing the headphones the FBI had given you with the recording device. In that moment, you have to be yourself, but you also know that what you're doing and you're capturing your dad. What was that like?
Well, it was very hard, but again, I used everything he taught me against him. And I knew I can't say one wrong word. I can't make one wrong movement, because if he has an idea, and a couple times he almost did, because he looked at me with the eye, and I knew, so I would back off. I knew how to back off. But if he catches me, I'm dead. And if anybody else catches me in there, I'm dead. And the government, because all the concrete and the secrecy in that prison, they couldn't monitor me when I was out there. They waited. Either I came back or the prison alarm went off and they knew I was dead. But it was hard because we talked for a long time. And parts of it was actually me and him trying to work out our relationship. And then the other parts was me trying to get him to admit to things so that I could keep him locked up forever. So emotionally, when I was done, I'd go back to my cell and I just, in my pillow, I just had tears coming down my eyes, and I just wished there was something else I could do. I would rather, I volunteered to do his time at one time at the beginning, but the lawyer says they wouldn't, government wouldn't go for it. I mean, it wasn't about prison, Dane. It was about me and my dad. And the hardest thing I ever did to this day is go against my own father.
Let's fast forward to the trial a couple years later. In 2007, I was one of the many, many spectators at that trial covering it. I always say it was one of the most dramatic, it is the most dramatic trial I've ever seen in a courtroom in Chicago. More drama than you'd find like at Steppenwolf or something. What was it like for you? I remember that day when you were in court and you had to leave. You overcome with emotion when your dad was picking on you on the stand. Remember that?
Yeah, so well, actually, I know he picked on my brother too, Kurt, which is another story in itself. My brother's having a hard time because with everything my dad did to him. But for me, when I walked in that courtroom, I glanced. I didn't want to make eye contact with my dad because I didn't want to make it a contest in the courtroom. So I tried to keep looking forward. And, when I sat down, they purposely put me in the courtroom towards the end of the day on a Friday, knowing that I might be emotionally overwhelmed because it's my dad. So when I walked in and I looked at him, I hadn't seen him in about 5, 6 years. And I'm looking at him, and part of me wants to go over there and hug him and take him and say, "Come on, Dad, we're going home now. Enough of this craziness." But then as soon as I seen those dirty looks, I remembered why I was there. And I sat down and, it was hard, and it's all this courtroom watching me and my dad air our dirty laundry in front of everybody. It was a lot. It was a lot. That whole time, that week or so, I've hardly slept at night. And I had to do so much preparation.
And the feds had to keep you buttoned up and secure, of course. Were you ever concerned for your own safety during the trial?
No, no, this was more important to me. I mean, I'm aware of my surroundings, and remember, I just really basically testified against my dad, nobody else. I know there's always the chance, but I knew that the day I put the wire in, but I knew I had to finish what I started because if he gets on the street, I'm dead or he's dead, and one of us is locked up forever. So I wasn't concerned about that. Dan, I'm not a tough guy, but I'm not one to run and hide. This is between me and my dad. The biggest mistake my dad ever made was trying to get the mob to kill my uncle Nick, lying to them that, he's not going to be able to do this, he's not going to do that. And he caused all these problems. And when there was an attempt on his life, that's when my uncle started cooperating. And he was the one who really took down the whole mob. There's a lot of guys that could have got in trouble, and they knew that I volunteered to cooperate. So I wasn't obligated to start getting everybody in trouble. That was not part of my agreement with the government. So why would you get involved and then all of a sudden you're going to get arrested and be in the middle of something that you don't need to be in the middle of?
A tough question, but looking back on this from 20 years now, do you have any regrets about the way any of this turned out?
The regret I have, number one, is that I wish me and my dad were in prison together, that he got it and he was honest with me and we could have worked this out. Went our separate ways in what we did in life, but still remain father and son. The other regret I have is everything I put my whole family through. My brothers, my mother, my cousins, my kids, my ex-wife, put everybody through.
Well, and you're honest, and in your talk, I know at the Mob Museum as well, you were no choir boy back then, right?
I'll never sit up here and tell you I'm a victim. I did a lot of bad things in my life at one time that I'm embarrassed of today. I needed prison. I was in a bad place, partying, you name it. I was in the middle of it, desensitized, walking around with a gun every day, not knowing what's going to happen next, knowing my dad's trying to kill me. Am I going to kill him? Yeah, I needed prison. Prison saved me. Prison saved me.
How are you changed today? I'll ask you that question again. How are you a
Sure.
changed man today?
Well, in prison, I got to learn about Frank. I got to learn what I needed to do. I got healthy. I cleared my mind. Even though this whole thing's going on with my dad, I still have my life. My ex-wife divorced me. I wanted to get my family back together. What am I going to do for career? There was a lot going on, and I was able to get through it all. I was diagnosed with MS in 2000, but carrying that 25 years. Uh, I'm healthy today. I'm 65 now. I work out. I love what I do at the museum. I speak to a lot of people, and there's a lot because this is a family story, Dane. It's not about me getting up and telling you who got killed, who ordered it, who's the boss. This is about what this life does to your family. And at the museum here, I think I found my niche, and it's going great. And I get a lot of people that are relating to parts of the story.
I wanted to ask you about your work at the museum because I didn't realize until I looked at the website. I mean, you're there 5 days a week telling your story multiple times a day. Tell me about that. Is it cathartic to be able to speak to strangers about what you went through?
It partially is. There's challenges too. Some people walk in, he's a rat. Yeah, I am a rat. Okay, you have to live with the title. Okay, but I'm not at the museum to try to get you to agree with me, pat me on the back, and say, "Oh, good good job, you know, and I get people coming in that relate. They don't know what to do. I have a family member that I'm going through the same thing. Where, like you told me, where do you draw the line? When do you stand up for yourself? And I feel like I'm getting through to a lot of people. And yes, I do work. Dane, you've known me for a long time by covering this case and everything. You know, I've always worked hard, always had a job, always will. And I feel like I'm doing something here that's productive. And I need that, you know, just because I'm out of that life doesn't mean I still don't have that evil in me that sometimes I have to step back and process because I see things and I start thinking like a criminal. One more time, do something good and give it to my kids. And you know who I answer to today? My two kids and my grandson. That's my life now.
Why do you think this story stays alive, and how is it staying alive? Tell me about, I mean, we've talked before about, this is one of the great dramatic family stories of all time. It's something Shakespeare could have written. What can you tell us about getting that story to the big screen, to a TV series? It's been fits and starts over the years, but it's got to be told at some point, right?
Yeah, I'm surprised, but it seems like it never dies. Something always comes up. Every time it's ready to die, something new comes up or some part of this comes up. I've been working on projects for a long time, and you know, I always say sometimes Hollywood's tougher than the street. You know, I've been close a few times. I'm very, very close now with getting a green light with the Chicago local that's doing unbelievable stuff right now. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Uh, but I believe this is what I truly believe. Anybody that's watched Sopranos, and I listened to David Chase in interviews too. There were three parts of Sopranos that caught my eye. One, the Italian family in the home, how their culture was. Number two, the mob family, how their culture was. And number three, the Italian family, Tony's family, the people that weren't involved in this life, but yet how this life affected them. And I think that's my story to a T.
I know Uncle Nick passed away a couple years ago. What can you tell us about the last few
Sure.
years of his life?
Yeah. So Uncle Nick, you know, Uncle Nick, he started out as a soldier. You know, he was in the Navy, did all kinds of secret missions and everything. And he believed and idolized my dad like I did. And we believed everything my dad told me. The difference between me and my uncle is as soon as he got in this life, he was ordered to kill. He didn't have the luxury of being in it for 8, 10 years before he was ordered to kill like I was. And once he was in, he could not get out. And then when he started to see what's going on, and multiple times, my dad, one time, you know, beat him. Another time was going to try to kill him with Ronnie Jarrett. And, you know, at one point, he wanted out. And then and once my dad tried to kill him a second time, he started cooperating. Lived with a heavy heart. He killed innocent people. He admitted to 14 murders. Okay. I was lucky enough to talk with my uncle a couple of times when we were both home. He came home, he got out of witness protection, he lived a low life, always concerned that somebody was going to try to kill him, but he was with his kids. He spent his time with his family. He became very close, him and my brother Kurt, so they spent a lot of time together. And he did pass on a couple of years ago naturally, you know, with his family. So he had a heavy heart. He had a hard time sleeping at night. He had some ailments that that were caused by this life, the stress of it and what you've done.
Do you think he found peace at the end of his life?
I don't know if he did or not. I know he was struggling with it, but I mean that's a question my brother Kurt would probably answer better because they were very close at the end. They were both really struggling with the fact of what my father did to both of them as a father and a brother.
And to finish it up, Frank, by asking, your father passed away a number of years ago, but as someone whose father, my father passed a few years ago too, you still have that relationship with your dad, even if they're gone. How is that relationship like for you now? Do you still think about him a lot? Is he still in your dreams?
Yes, yes, every day. I use a lot of stuff he taught me, but I use it positively. You know, I always thought, Dane, when my dad died, he was if there was a hell, he's going to hell and he's going to haunt me. And when he died on Christmas Day, which was his favorite day at one time, when he was the most generous person I've ever seen, I felt that he died naturally, that he finally got what he did to the rest of the family, not me. But he tells me, Frank, I'm watching you every day. You're just like me. Don't make the same mistakes I did. So I used that sometimes before I make decisions, especially if I'm not thinking so clearly or right or stupid. And I use that and I look up to him a lot. I don't forget the bad stuff, but I blame that this life changing my dad like that. But yeah, I always love him. I just didn't like who he became. He's
After
an important part of my life to this day.
after 20 years, why do you think people are still fascinated by this story?
Well, there is a fascination with organized crime from the movies, the glorious part of it, but there's also a fascination about how this can wreck your family and the effects that you don't always see. And that's why I believe that it's still as popular as it is. Because everybody can relate to family.